obviously we know he just signed with the Clippers. And then let's talk about, is Jonathan Kuminga going to end up on the Chicago Bulls? So let's talk about those things in this live stream. So first, let's talk about the Chris Paul thing. So obviously Chris Paul had some interest, I reported as if I have all these inside connections, but I talked about on this channel that the reports that I was hearing is that Chris Paul was either going to go back to the Clippers or the Suns. That was kind of what the speculation was. And it just made sense because obviously the Suns, need a point guard. They have needed one since Chris Paul left. And the Clippers make sense because he was there for so long and apparently his family's there and he wants to be close to them and, he's familiar with the organization and stuff like that. So Chris Paul ends up going to the Clippers, which again, not surprising. I saw a report that, and I don't know how much this factored into Chris Paul's decision, but that it wasn't because Milwaukee, for example, I believe was interested in him as well. And he could have had more playing time and a bigger role in Milwaukee as compared to the Clippers, but it was more about, apparently his family, which is fine. That makes sense. I'm just saying that was apparently the report. And also, again, the Clippers, he was there for so long, so he is comfortable there. So I think Chris Paul is a great addition to this team because Chris Paul, again, I know he's, potentially in his last season, but Chris Paul is still going to be able to impact the team in a positive way. Now, is he going to get a ton of playing time on the roster or every game? Not necessarily, because not only do they have James Harden, who is obviously going to start a point guard for them, but they also have Chris Dunn, who played very well last year. And depending on the matchup, there may be nights where Chris Paul, doesn't play as much. And so I think he's accepted that role, and so I think he's okay with that. But let's just think about it for a second. If Chris Paul is your third string point guard, you're looking pretty good at that position. So sorry, the AC. Every time I go live, the AC wants to make noise. I can't believe it. I don't know why. It just waits till I go live. But Chris Paul, as your third string point guard, is going to have a positive impact on your team. Because Chris Paul could be a starting point guard on some teams in the league. Now, I wouldn't say every team on the league, at this point in his career, but he still has the ability to be a starting point guard in this league. So, as your third string point guard, you can't do much better than that. I think the Clippers roster, as we talk about every year, is good. Every single year, the Clippers have a good roster. You got Bradley Beal now. You picked up Brook Lopez in the offseason. Now you picked up Chris Paul. You turned Norman Powell into kind of Bradley Beal, even though he wasn't part of the trade. But you traded Norman Powell because in my mind, they expected to get Bradley Beal on a buyout. But you traded Norman Powell for John Collins. This team figures out a way to get players and get deals done. So the roster is just good every single year. Again, sorry about the AC. It likes to overshadow me on live. But this team always figures out a way to get better and better, or just have a deep roster. It's just the health of Kawhi Leonard. Can everything come together in the playoffs? Something always happens every year. And I'm not picking the Clippers necessarily to win the championship, but let's think about it for a second. Imagine Chris Paul wins a championship in his last NBA season. Let's think about that for a second. Imagine Chris Paul wins a championship with the Los Angeles Clippers in the last year of his career. What a storybook ending, especially for a player where a lot of people have, wanted him to win a ring. Of course, obviously he wants to win a ring himself. But a player where a lot of people have, talked about all the injuries and just unfortunate things that have happened in the playoffs for him to not be able to get a ring. So imagine he retires with a ring. That's a storybook ending if there is one for Chris Paul. And it's him winning it with the Clippers. So again, I'm not picking them to win the championship necessarily. I'm just saying if we're talking about storylines and stuff like that, that's one of the best ones in the league. For Chris Paul, at least. So besides that, Chris Paul, again, is likely retiring after the season that it was reported. So That also makes sense because Chris Paul has been in the league this is his 21st NBA season. We talk about LeBron playing so many years, but Chris Paul has been in the league almost as long as LeBron. Like, he has been here, for 2 decades. So Chris Paul has earned so many accolades throughout the NBA, throughout his years in the league. I think last year with the Spurs, he still averaged like 9 assists a game. You have to, check that for me. I'm not positive. You have to go look at the stats because I'm not 100% on that. But even at 39, 40 years old, Chris Paul still averaged 9 assists. So he still has some basketball left in him. So I think the role on the Clippers is going to be good for him because he's not going to have to put, too much stress on his body to, play 30 minutes a game and be a starting point guard. Even though, of course, he would love that. But, like, I feel like given his injury history, like, this is, a good fit for him and a good idea. So I do think Chris Paul makes the Clippers better. I think everything they have done this offseason has made them better. Do they get the championship? I don't know, but they always make moves and they always seem to get better on paper every offseason. Even when they feel like they have no more moves, they figure it out. So shout out to the Clippers for that. And then I want to talk about the Jonathan Kuminga thing because I saw a report today and we see reports all the time. So, like, you never know how legit a report, is or isn't because it just is what it is in the NBA. Like, there's things and just talked about all the time. But I saw something about Jonathan Kuminga being linked to the Bulls is not like breaking news. I've seen that already. So that's not like something where I'm questioning the legitimacy of that. But that there is apparently, I guess, hope on the Warriors side. I don't know if hope is the right word, that they can get a sign and trade done with the Chicago Bulls. And the player that they are apparently targeting is Ayo Dosunmu. And I think Ayo Dosunmu is an underrated player in the league. I think he has a lot of potential to get even better, and I think he has played well in his time with the Chicago Bulls. I think he showed his versatility, as with his time with the Chicago Bulls, and he's on the last year of his deal, which I believe is like $7 million or something. So, like, I'm sure he's looking for an extension somewhere because I'm sure he wants to, have a new contract. But if you get Ayo Dosunmu, again, I think he's a really good up-and-coming player. I think he can do a whole bunch of different things well. So I think that would be a nice fit for the Warriors for sure. My only question is if they're doing a sign-and trade. I don't know what the Chicago Bulls salary cap looks like, so I'd have to look after this video. But obviously, Kuminga wants probably close to $30 million per year. Maybe he won't get that. Maybe he'll get like 25 per year. Like, I don't know exactly what he's going to end up getting if they do a sign-and trade. But the point of what I'm saying is, sorry, the AC again making noise. It loves to outshine me. But the point I'm making is if they do a sign and trade and they give him, let's just say 4-year, $80 million, which is 20 per year, or they give him 4-year, $100 million, which is 25 per year. If I would assume was only making like $7 million per year, I don't know what the Chicago Bulls salary cap looks like, so maybe they can take that money on without having to, give back more money in return for the Warriors. But if that's not the case, then I don't know how this deal will get done because obviously Ayo Dosunmu's contract does not match that $25 million, that Jonathan Kuminga would be getting in this scenario. So as long as the Chicago Bulls don't have that issue of salary, cap problems, whatever, then I don't see why this trade couldn't happen. It just depends if the Bulls want to pay him that money because, remember, they have a restricted free agent in Josh Giddey, who also is apparently looking for a $30 million pay. So, and guess what? Cam Thomas, restricted free agent on the Brooklyn Nets, is also reportedly looking for $30 million. And I don't know how much Quentin Grimes is looking for, but I'm sure he's looking for $30 million too. Everybody wants to get their money. I don't blame him for it. But I guess it just depends if the Chicago Bulls value Jonathan Kuminga more than they value Josh Giddey because they'd be essentially paying Jonathan Kuminga the money that Josh Giddey wants. So who do they like better, Jonathan Kuminga or Josh Giddey? Because one or the other. I mean, Josh Giddey doesn't have to end up getting the $30 million because, like, the Chicago Bulls don't have to do that, obviously. Like, they can, extend him an offer of whatever they feel is fair. And Josh Giddey could accept the qualifying offer and then try to go to free agency next year as an unrestricted free agent. But generally speaking, like, if they're going to get a deal done, it's just a matter of do they value Jonathan Kuminga more or Josh Giddey? Because it's going to be like this same amount of money either way, whoever you pay. The Chicago Bulls, I don't know what they're going to do with Vucevic, to be honest. I'm not sure how many years he has left on his deal. Maybe this is his last year. Maybe he has another year after that. Because I remember them giving him like an extension pretty recently. So I don't know if he has 2 years left or something like that. And he actually had a pretty good year last year, especially like numbers wise. I just think the value for him has gone down around the league. And it's not because of anything he did. It's not really his fault. It's just like the CBA, as we talk about all the time on this channel, like teams just don't want to take on these large contracts that they are just not sure it's going to, work out for them. So I don't know what they're going to do with Vucevic. Maybe he'll just play out his contract there. Maybe eventually they'll buy him out. I don't know if that's on the table. I am not sure. I haven't heard anything about a buyout with, Vucevic. So I'm not saying that's what's happening. But that's a possibility we see what teams are doing around the league, buying out players, to get their money off the books. And obviously his contract is not as large as Bradley Beal's or, I was about to say Chris Paul, or Damian Lillard's. So because his contract is not as large, they won't have to have as much, dead money on their books. Because his contract is just not $113 million like theirs. At least I don't think it is. Again, I have to look, but I don't think he has that much money left on his deal. So I don't know what they're going to do with Vucevic, but he is definitely someone I guess you could look out for because maybe he will get bought out and, then he'll be available for any team. And again, kind of like Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal at $50 million, I understand teams are a little bit hesitant. Bradley Beal at, the $5-ish million he's getting, that's a good deal. So similar to Vucevic. I don't know how much he's making. Maybe he's making like 25 a year, 20. I don't know what he's making. But Vucevic at 25 a year, not 50 million, but maybe teams are still like hesitant because of the new CBA. Fair. Vucevic at 5 million. I mean, again, statistically, he had a really good year last year. Unless I'm like forgetting, and that was the year before. I think it was last year where he was putting up amazing numbers. We know he could stretch the floor for teams. Like, teams are always looking for a stretch big. And if he's putting up those type of numbers, he's clearly, still in his prime enough to have an impact on any championship contender. Is he going to start on every single team that's a championship contender? I guess it depends on their roster and who they have in their center rotation. But could he play backup center for one of these teams and be a really impactful player? Absolutely. So again, I haven't heard any kind of buyout rumors. I'm just saying like that is definitely something to think about because they traded Zach LaVine, they traded DeRozan, and nobody's contract is untradeable in the NBA. We see it, but it may just be easier for them to buy him out. Also because then they don't have to take back money. Because like, again, the CBA, I know nobody wants to talk about that. I know I don't want to talk about it either anymore. But with the new CBA, who says they necessarily want to, I know this sounds weird, but do they want to trade Vucevic? Because like, unless they're getting a really valuable like first round pick, like I understand, or something like that. But like, if they're just trading him to take on more money, and then they're going to have money on their books, which, teams are looking to have free money this upcoming off season and then next off season. So is that really beneficial to them? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I guess it just depends on what the package is, if there is a package. So I just think I'm not going to rule out a buyout possibility. I don't know. I'm just not going to rule it out. But I definitely do think, again, going back to, Jonathan Kuminga, that it just depends on who the Bulls value more, Josh Giddey or Jonathan Kuminga. And what if Josh Giddey takes the qualifying offer and he outplays his contract, and then next summer a team offers him this large deal that the Bulls didn't want to offer him, and they could have already had him under contract for, let's say, 4 years. Because remember, the report was everybody is available except for Josh Giddey, and I think maybe one other player. But like the report was that the Bulls are potentially willing to trade Kobe White, who has gotten better every single year. Like, Kobe White has had breakout seasons for them. And I don't know if it's true or not, but reportedly the only like untouchables was Josh Giddey and I think like one other player. I forgot who it was. So if you're telling me Josh Giddey is untouchable, that is where like the confusion comes in for me. Like, I understand like you have to negotiate. You, as a team, you want to pay the least amount possible that you can. So I'm not arguing with that. But like, if he is untouchable and he outplays his contract this upcoming season, and then he gets $30 million next season, or next offseason rather, he's not restricted, so you can't match it. And even if you do somehow like match it, you know, because since they got him in a trade from OKC, I think they get his bird rights. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure if they have his bird rights. But let's say they do. He may feel insulted. He's like, you didn't want to offer me that. I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but he may be like, you didn't want to offer me that money, you know, last year when I really wanted to stay. Like, again, I don't know what he's thinking, but you didn't want to offer me that money last year when I wanted to stay. And now that another team, you know, is trying to give me $35 million or $30 million, whatever it is, and he obviously would earn it through his play, you know, in the scenario I'm describing, then he's like, I don't have to stay because I'm unrestricted. So sometimes it's a tricky game. Sometimes it works out for the player. Sometimes it works out for the organization when you have a restricted free agent, if they bet on themselves. We've seen it work out where the player bet on themselves and it worked out in the team's favor. The player either doesn't have the market that they were expecting to when they hit unrestricted free agency, or even if they have a market, it's not the market that they wanted. And so they kind of, you know, not have to go back to that team, but like that may be where they get the most money still, even if it's not the money that they originally wanted. And then sometimes it works out for the players. Like, they bet on themselves, they have an amazing season, then it's like, oh, if we had just given that player, whoever it is, $5 million more a year, we wouldn't have lost him for nothing. So it really just depends, you know, what ends up happening. Because I was talking about Cam Thomas recently, and I said, for the 4 restricted free agents that are left, the best ones are Jonathan Kuminga, Josh Giddey, Cam Thomas, and Quentin Grimes. And when I was talking about 4 of them, I said, with Cam Thomas, he is the type of player to bet on himself. I don't see the Nets coming to an agreement with Cam Thomas, or Cam Thomas coming to an agreement with them, vice versa, whichever way. Cam Thomas is the type of guy to bet on himself. So I was saying he is someone where I feel like the situation is going to end up, and I could be wrong, but it's going to end up where he is going to accept the qualifying offer, play the season, and try to ball out and get a big contract next offseason when he's unrestricted. So that's how I felt the Cam Thomas situation works out. And whether or not he ends up getting that big contract for next offseason remains to be seen. But if Josh Giddey does the same thing, that's what I'm saying. Like, you weigh your options. It really just depends. Like I said, the only really kind of confusing thing to me is they said he's untouchable. So how untouchable is he actually? $20 million may be the breaking point for them at untouchable. $30 million says, oh, he's tradable. I don't know. So that's my opinion on that. So thank you guys so much for watching this live stream. I hope you enjoyed.